Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Sketchwave, our weekly show where we talk all things digital art because we do a lot of Procreate content here on YouTube, creating tutorials every week on our channels. My name is Joel, otherwise known as JoelCreate, and my co-host, as always, is the one and only James Julier. James, did you like that sort of off-the-cuff intro, a little bit different from the script?
Yeah, it was a bit off script.
Did I catch you by surprise?
Very good, yeah, excellent.
Now, it's probably worth noting that we only recorded our last episode 2 days ago. So we won't go too much into how our week's been because we have not really done anything other than potentially, if you can see in my edit, I've painted one of the walls and hopefully fixed a little bit of the audio in here. So yeah, we are only a couple of days since our last recording, but it's going to follow similar sort of process as we normally do. But we've got a really fun topic today where we're going to go ahead and break down our very first tutorials. Be prepared, I imagine, for James cringing a lot in this one because when we brought up the concept of it,
mine are a lot older.
It was your idea, to be fair. Let's start off then with our current tutorials. Well, because there's only been a couple of days in between, I've released a tutorial and James has released an extended version of his previous tutorial. So we're going to take a look at those. As always, there's timestamps in the description down below if you'd like to skip ahead to the very first tutorials we made. But as always, we're going to break down our previous ones. Do you want to go first or do you want to go second?
I'll go second this time. Please explain your owl tutorial to us.
Let's do it. Okay, so I wanted to create, again, something very minimal. And let's be honest, I'm fully aware of the fact that a lot of them at the minute have been fairly simple, simply because, obviously, the move, as I mentioned in the previous episode, lots of stuff on at the minute. So a simple one, but again, to be honest, and you'll see it later on when we get to the first one I made, it really kind of takes me back to the first few kind of tutorials I made. Very simple kind of silhouette style shapes where they don't have a lot to them in terms of detail on each sort of layer as it makes its way backwards in the scene. Now, this one actually baked into the tutorial actually shows someone how to make a stamp brush as well. Because in the past, I would always use like a tree set brush, stamp set, and without any explanation really as to how to maybe do that or come up with your own or how they came about. It was just downloaded from a site. I already had a few that I'd already made previously, but I wanted to show people how to do that. And it's a perfect exercise to do that because they can draw some trees, create stamps from them, and then use them in future work as well.
Yeah.
Now, it started off initially where I just wanted that kind of moon scene. It could even be like a Halloween kind of vibe to this one.
I was going to say, it's heading towards that time, isn't it? Yeah, it seems quite appropriate.
It is. And I think you could swap out the owl in the foreground for a bat, potentially, or something else, something a bit more creepy, or crow or something like that. And it fit that kind of style. But again, I like this concept sometimes of not having to know whether or not it's a sunset, sunrise, is it a moon? It doesn't really matter. We know that there's a light source in the sky, and keeping it simple and minimal. And this one, out of the whole canvas, it shrinks it right down into the center. It just keeps it really, again, minimal, just really straightforward. Different colors from start to back with the trees, obviously getting a little bit lighter further away, darker towards us, and then just a little bit of detail in the foreground with a sort of naked tree and an owl just resting on one of the branches. So there's also some birds in the very distance as well, a light flare in there, but roughly around about that kind of 20-minute mark. And again, seeing that reacting to the one that we're going to later on, it's cool that I can still do that and still get some joy out of it. Sometimes when we get a little bit more simple with it, I kind of feel like I'm not stretching my kind of creativity or artistic muscle in any way, and sometimes I don't get much enjoyment out of them. It's more like a task to fill out certain playlists potentially. But this one I really did enjoy for little sort of details I added. So yeah, I had fun with it.
Nice glow as well. It's a nice aesthetic.
It's always the add glow. It's just always looks so cool. And the glow itself is actually 3 different layers, and that's where, I don't know if you can see around the actual, let's call it sun. You've got the yellow, and then there's a second ring around it, which is like a more orange ring. And that's just, again, the layer in behind blurred out. And then add layer on top. And it just created almost like a that kind of lens flare effect where you can see the rings of light and it sort of distorting slightly. So it worked out pretty cool. I did go for a few different palettes of it, but I'm very pleased with it. Let's take a look at your extended version, because I always find your extended ones really interesting, because when you look at a lot of your finished designs in terms of the YouTube versions, it's quite interesting to then think how you personally will go about adding new stuff, whether or not you save stuff as you are making your way through the tutorial. Do you have things in mind? Talk us through, because this is not something we've necessarily spoken about too much.
Yeah.
One, obviously the design, but also the processes that you go through when creating your tutorials. Again, potentially saving ideas. Do you have any that pop up during, or is it simply just a whole new task later on after the initial recording?
Yeah, it can vary. Sometimes I'll start with an image and I can see the opportunity to break it down into, the basic version, if you like, for YouTube, and then with an extended detail. And I will look out for ideas, images to inspire me in that direction and come up with concepts. But sometimes the time constraint for filming or for the length of video that I want to put onto YouTube, because I'm trying my best to, I've done quite a few long ones recently, but I'm trying to keep them as relatively short as possible. They could easily spin into 2-hour tutorials, and quite often, and I think they're fine, but I try to keep them just really occasional if it's going to be a super long one. So it was a 42-minute tutorial, and I wanted it to be as short as possible for the main one. There were some little things that I thought, I missed the chimney out. That wasn't a deliberate act at the time, but I knew that the mountains in the background were very flat. It was just a really flat gradient with no texture whatsoever. So I knew that was something that I could revisit in an extended one, which I did. And then I thought, well, actually, there's no obvious way of entry to the cabin. So I thought, well, the door, and then it's another opportunity to add another little light on there, because I really loved the glow from the windows. And then we've got the chimney with the smoke. What else have we got? We've got a couple of patches of ground in front of the cabin where the light is shining on the grass. We've almost got like exposed rock, sort of blue colours coming through, make it a little bit more patchy. More refined detail on the edge of the cloud at the top. It's just a little bit more textured, a little bit more sort of fragments of smaller texture of cloud. And I think that's pretty much it. It's about a 15-minute extension to watch, and it probably takes longer to follow along, but people often tell me that it's taken them 8 hours to do one of the tutorials, and you tend to think, because we've done it, and the tutorial lasts for 40 minutes, you don't quite picture that people have to pause it and then copy every step. So what can be a 15-minute or even a half an hour tutorial can end up being a couple of hours on the other end, can't it? So a reason why, like yourself, I've tried to do a few shorter ones in mix as well. If I could do them all at about half an hour, I think that would be about perfect. If you could do a half an hour painting tutorial with all of the detail that I'd like to put in it, then it would be an awesome package to be able to present to people. But it inevitably ends up being way longer than half an hour at the fully edited version. But which is why I do keep aside the kind of the space to add some refinements in the extended version. In this case, it is just that refining, really. I kind of look at it, give myself a couple of days to really just think, well, what could I do to make that image better in the space of half an hour, and make it something that people can spend another half an hour or so actually improving it. So the relatively minor adjustments. Occasionally it's more dramatic. This case, it's tweaking and refining, really, and I think that it gives more depth to the image and just a bit more polish to the overall look. That's what I aim for.
It looks awesome, and like you said, the extra little details, like the door as well. It's another excuse to use the lighting, isn't it, and just allow that to burst out from another angle. So
yeah.
I also see I don't know if you mentioned it, if I missed that, but the details in the mountain in the background as well. That kind of So what sort of process did you do for that? Because this is one of those moments where you look at the scene and you can see it almost tells you like there's a lot of data there in terms of like detail, but it's further back. Is that like a soft airbrush to create the kind of streaks down there and the flow and contour of the the mountain range?
It was it was the rainforest brush.
I don't even know why I asked. I knew what the answer was. I don't know why I bothered.
And I really exaggerated the spacing so that when I was doing like, I always imagine like flows of stone or snow that's forming like little rivers, like little veins that of lines almost that pour down. But it would initially appear as like little fragments sort of spaced apart as it flows down, and then I went over it with a soft airbrush just to kind of add a bit more deliberate line to it where I felt it needed strengthening up. So it's a mixture of the rainforest predictably and the airbrush predictably as well. Yeah, so my
as a hypothetical, do you think you could extend this again, or is that it done?
Yeah, I think there's always potential. I mean, we spoke in the last episode about I could extend the canvas size, change the proportions, maybe make it a portrait picture and have tons of space lower down to add, a path or all sorts of stuff. I kind of think that then it becomes such a different image that it kind of would become basically a new tutorial. And I'd rather, if I'm going to have to invent so much more to change it in that sense, then I think it just justifies being a new image at that point. If it's worth doing, then make it another image, Also,
to be fair, if you extended the canvas with my suggestion, like lower down and like increase the kind of foreground, the whole tutorial is literally just adding ground and dark tone, probably with a little subtle amount of texture on and detail, but it's just drawing ground, which I guess from a, kind of like a consumer of the content, that's probably not the most exciting thing in the world to do in comparison to the first version and doing the actual hut though and the glow and that whole process.
I wanted to just refine the hut a little bit more, make it even more interesting and more of a focal point. And it's just subtle changes, but yeah, I think anyone that's seen other people's versions posted on, a lot of people post in the Facebook group and on Instagram and things like that. And I do like to look out for who's followed the extended and those little extra details, and it's quite fun to spot the ones that they followed along. So yeah, I mean, obviously there'll be patrons, and it's not always at the higher tiers. Sometimes at the very bottom tiers of the entry level tiers of patrons. I do make some of them available once a month. I give an extended tutorial to them as well. So yeah,
cool.
So it's really cool.
And just as a little plug, we both do have Facebook groups. So if you want to come and join in with community and other users that are creating our content, and to be fair, I'm not sure how yours works, but anyone in my community can post whatever they want. If it's your tutorial, it's anybody else's tutorial, it doesn't really matter. I don't really tend to sort of keep it just to my
tutorials
content
in the group as well, and it's nice to see. I do, it's good. Because it is the community, and it shouldn't just be, well, this is my group and it's all about me. It's not like that at all. It's for sharing knowledge, sharing ideas, and it's focused around us as creators, but then we've got to be open to what other people want to show us, because it means a lot to people. So a friend of mine, she's in my Discord and she does the doodle challenge on a weekly basis, and she said to me numerous times now, she's like, do you not care that like everybody posts, other people's tutorials in there, even though it's your community? I'm like, no, it makes no difference. I'm proud of the fact that I have a community space that's like a safe space in a sense. And I mean that in more of a sense, like the rules put in place of like, you do not provide criticism on someone else's work unless the person has requested that criticism. If somebody is in the comments saying, oh, but you could have done that, that's a warning in my particular Discord group. And I think very infrequent that we have to be
that.
open to that sometimes, don't we, as tutors and creators? I do get people that will say, oh, well, you should have done this and you should have done that and you did this wrong, and it's fine.
I'm fine with that on our content. It's more the other people, like if just our viewers are posting their own work, and even if it's their own creative work, they don't need to be put to the jury in that kind of sense. So I don't particularly like it, and I find it really unnecessary when people do that, because that person, that could be the best piece they've ever made, and they're super happy with it, and it was their whole weekend and whole week or whatever, and then you kind of criticize unnecessarily. And But I don't want to get down a negative hole on that one. But it is interesting how these kind of communities work about sharing sort of work
Mainly very positive
from
isn't
different
it? Yeah.
creators.
Yeah.
And the whole space is a general positive space anyway, isn't it? So, we might as well just keep that going. Now, I don't think we're going to find this next bit very positive. Well, we might do, maybe nostalgic, I don't know. But we're going to react to our previous tutorials, our first ever tutorials. Now, before we get to them, mine was about 3.5 years ago, and I think yours is almost double that and a bit, isn't it?
Oh, it's about 8.5 years old. It'll be 9 years old in December, my tutorial. So yeah.
Wow, that's a long time on YouTube as well. So what I'm going to do is we're going to add in our videos and let's take a look at exactly this content that we're talking about. Okay, so I'm up first. We're going to take a look at my first tutorial. Now, straight off the bat, this doesn't even look like my content anymore. I think this was no doubt heavily inspired by Flo and her kind of setup and the pens on the side and the plants. And I particularly love how I've put my iPad down and it's off-centered slightly to the right, which looks fantastic.
I've also noticed that you changed the dark from the dark mode to the light mode on your tutorials.
Yeah, I get asked about this all the time. Joel, can you change it? The difference was at the time, because I was recording with my phone and the brightness of white elements would blow the camera out so much. So in terms of if you just had a moon like in this one, so I just made the whole app light mode, which then made sure that the brightness of the content was always the same.
Yeah.
Now, this tutorial is, again, 3.5 years ago. I can remember it like it was yesterday, though, in terms of the actual process of it. So I'll talk through sort of the setup first, because it was a very janky setup. This is my dining table. It's quite a long one, and I'm sat at the end of it. And I've got a tripod with a selfie stick hanging over the top. You can see my phone in the reflection just here, and it's in like a phone grip. And then because it was hanging so far over and I didn't want to get the tripod legs in, I had to weigh down the other side of the tripod with coats and books that were just lying around on the side. Very janky. And at the time, a friend of Mrs. Create was staying with us for a little while. And I got this all set up and I just about to start recording. She came downstairs and immediately I was like, oh, what am I doing? Like, this is just like so weird, because she had to walk past to go to the kitchen and then back upstairs. So I'm looking at this going, oh, should I be doing this? But I'm glad I did, obviously. But it worked out okay. But when I hear this, and we may not hear it in the edit, but maybe I'll put a clip in, I can hear it in my voice, the actual nervousness in my voice that I can hear. Just, you talk when you start YouTube sometimes in that nervous tone, and it's very slow. It's very slow. It's like very, you're overthinking sometimes what you're saying to a degree. And then if you're not thinking too much, you then think, wait, what did I just say? Was that right? Was that the right terminology I should have used? So for me, it was really...
You're not used to hearing your own voice, are you? So you don't really know what you sound like. Or you might have an idea, but most people cringe at the sound of their own voice anyway, initially, don't they? And I think you learn a different rhythm, a different speaking rhythm, don't you? While over the time of editing your own voice to death, I think you learn what really just you don't like listening to anymore, and you add a little bit of a different intonation in the way that you talk, and in a better way. Usually, you get that kind of radio voice almost, don't you?
Yeah. I particularly love the camera wobble in here as well. It's excellent. It's really good. And I don't know why I decided to... no matte screen cover either. Just a glass one, which is wicked. And the whole time, once we get into this, you can see up my nose the whole time. It's great to look back on, because it tells you how far you've moved forward. But in a minute, when I change this background color to a dark tone, it's just nothing but nostril. So yeah, that's great. But I don't know why I decided to put the camera so far away and then have to crop right in, and it just didn't really make any sense. Now I've listened to this back, and it's taken me a while there just to change the background color. I realized how much more descriptive I was at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Talking through certain things a little bit more, explaining certain sort of methods and things you can do. Double tap in the top left there to select white and double tap at the bottom to select black. You know, we're not progressing on. And I realized how much more descriptive I was back then with the content. Even to the point of creating the canvas size and explaining what the DPI would do to the canvas, and, you know, like good for printing and so on. It made such a difference. And you spoke earlier about kind of duration of videos and pace. I mean, like, if I tried to do that now and also do a little bit more of a detailed design, it wouldn't end. Like, it would just go on and on and on and on, because over time you start to kind of focus more on the objective, don't you, rather than the kind of almost less of the experience in a way. You focus a lot more on, we're creating this design today and let's create that design today. You know, I'm not going through each and every area here that I could do, and I'm explaining symmetry now. And I realize to a degree that that's been lost a little bit, and a little bit in a sort of negative way, in a sense. Like, I kind of, it had a lot of value to somebody watching it as a beginner, but obviously this particular design is aimed at a beginner rather than somebody a bit more experienced. So I guess in the long ones, you don't need to necessarily do that.
I think you whittle it down to the essentials over time, don't you? I think there are some basic fundamentals about art that you might, you maybe have got lost along the way, but they're not all necessary to get to the end result. And I think that you streamline to get to the necessary information over time. A little flourishes and little explanations here and there, I think, are valuable, though. I think that I do try to allow for them myself, and I think you do as well still. I don't think it's not entirely stripped away, is it? I think you have little asides and little extra commentary around things still.
Yeah, maybe in this one I'm just particularly going over absolutely everything. Yeah. It's interesting, but
I noticed the music's a big thing on this video, and that's different, isn't it now?
Yeah, I don't do that anymore. I don't add any music, just simply because of copyright purposes. And so many people also used to say to me that they'd like to listen to their own music when they watch these videos.
Sure, yeah.
So I kind of said, well, if somebody misses the piano music, the kind of like, music, they could go to Spotify and listen to a lo-fi playlist or a classic playlist or whatever they want to do for their experience, whatever type of music they like to also watch. And I guess to a degree also, we kind of have to think about the different types of our audience as well, like different ages as well. Maybe people with,
of course,
who can't hear too well potentially, or would struggle with the music in the background too. So yeah, that's been taken away as well. But this setup is...
So I was going to say, what equipment were you using then? So what's the phone? It's a phone. Is it an iPhone or?
Yeah, it would have been an 11 Pro Max at the time.
Right.
Still the same iPad. That's not changed. iPad Pro 2018, sorry, 11 inch is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
And at this point, though, obviously, now we'll talk about the differences between your first one in a moment, obviously. But obviously at this point, for me, there were a lot of people in the space that had already set the standards for how these tutorials should be made, i.e. sharing palettes, the format of it, providing the requirements, the canvas sizes. So rather than just kind of maybe being first and then learning after each video, straight off the bat, everybody had somewhat dictated that for me in a way, in a good way, that I knew what I needed to do to try and at least fit in to a degree. And I do remember putting this out there and thinking, like, it's never going to grow to that degree in terms of, like, how far will it go? Who knows? But it's only 3.5 years ago, so it's not that long ago when I think about it.
No, not really.
But the setup wise, this one is my least favorite, because there was a period where I had like much like the JoelCreate colors, like a blue and a purple, pinky purple. I had like lights on either side that would light up
Right. I
the
think I
setup,
remember seeing
and
that. Yeah.
yeah, it was a predominantly quite dark setup.
Yeah.
And now I just use simple white lights. But that
You
was
do
my
still have a
favorite
dark setup, don't you?
era.
The desk and things. It's quite a dark environment.
It is, yeah. I mean, the actual room itself isn't necessarily dark, but that
No.
everything involved in it, the matting behind the sketchboard, very dark. And that's another thing, because I use the sketchboard all the time, it kind of it absorbs a lot of the light in the video, but I can't really draw without it anymore. It feels really kind of clunky without drawing it, only because I've used it for so long now. But yeah, it's great to watch this back though and see the differences in your setup, realize how far you've come, and the differences that you've made for the better. Little things like camera and the different qualities that you now use. Turned on stabilization. That's obviously really quite handy now. So you don't have to feel like you're on a boat watching the videos anymore. And the old pinch to go full screen. I didn't do the full screen to go. I was pinch with 2 fingers. I go full screen with 4, and we end up with today's finished design. But not in this one. But yeah, that's a look back at that one. I don't think
there's anything to be too embarrassed about there. I think that you've definitely advanced since the first one. I can see things that the polish isn't there, and you get the camera wobble and stuff like that. But you've got a pretty good setup, or a pretty good style right from the start. I think that you hit the ground running. I don't think you should be too cringing at your first one at all.
I appreciate that. This, by the way, just happened to pop up on the autoplay. This is the favorite setup. The sketchboard and the blue and purple lights in the background just adds a bit more vibrancy to it. I wonder if I could get that going again. That's interesting. Anyway, let's get off of this one. Let's take a look at the pièce de résistance to this video. Now, let's take a look. 8 years ago now, nearly 1 million views on this. Okay, before we start, what were you thinking, as in like your process of getting this first video up? Were you nervous in any way, or did you feel like there was already going to be an audience there for it?
I'll be honest, it's slightly difficult to remember exactly what I was thinking and feeling at the time. I know that I'd done a couple of videos sort of demonstrating. I hope the sound's not on this, on me talking. Is it on the video? I don't want to listen to it at all anymore. There's lots of reasons why, but I'll come back to that. Initially I'd done a couple of demonstrations of the Apple Pencil and the iPad Pro because it was brand new at the time. And that's what kind of kickstarted my channel, really, just doing those demonstrations of drawings. They weren't tutorials in any sense. It was literally just me explaining how the iPad feels and things like that and how it functions. And then this one was showing how I would use it. And it was a bit more of a demonstration, and I was a talk through of the process. But I wouldn't say it was a strict followable, although lots of people have anyway. It wasn't quite the same format of tutorial that I have now, where I really give people every bit of useful information along the way. I do break it down. I explain what I'm doing at each day. Although you'll notice it takes me a good 3 minutes to actually start even doing any work. I just waffle and waffle and waffle for 3 minutes before anything happens. So
could I just point out at this point here that this shows how long you've been in the Procreate space. What is this layers panel in the top right corner? Why does it say layers like this in this funky font?
Oh,
and
yeah.
the
It's all
differences
changed,
in the design these days of the blend mode on the right hand side. When I was watching this, all of these menus look totally different to what they look like now. They've been so
Pretty
uniform
basic.
now, but back then it was so different. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so I don't remember being nervous about it at all, really. I mean, I didn't anticipate. I was getting views for the demonstration of it. I just thought, well, I'll do something a bit Bob Ross like, and I'll do like a painting demonstration with a bit of explanation and see how that goes. And then it just kind of became the format for it. I mean, really dodgy setup. I mean, honestly, it's just a table lamp spotlight.
Oh, I thought it was a candle.
It looks like that, really old school, doesn't it? Yeah. I actually had like a board that I attached a sat nav holder, so like a sucker holder that I'd press it against this board behind the iPad there, and then the phone I just used I think it must have been an iPhone 6, I guess at the time, was attached to this sat nav holder, and there's various points at which it becomes unsuckered from the thing and just crashes down on the iPad screen, and so I have to
Oh,
reset
gotcha.
it and start again. We spoke before this why did it look like I'd stopped and restarted, because the angle of the iPad changes every now and again, and that will still happen now in my current tutorials, normally because I've taken a break and then I've nudged things a little bit accidentally. But in that time, it was because it would come crashing down. And it's a wonder I didn't break the iPad screen from the thing crashing down on it. But that happened far too regularly. But yeah, talk about kind of clunky setup. It was pretty awful, but it did well enough. I mean, there weren't too. I wonder what I can't. I'd like to say that maybe there were other people doing something similar, and I don't remember that there were. I don't like to sort of say I started the whole thing, because I don't know whether that's accurate. I can't remember, honestly. I didn't have an easy or a really good example to follow from. I think there were plenty of people doing this kind of thing, actually, where it was just a showing off how to use the iPad. It was people drawing on the iPad, showing off the Apple Pencil, saying, look at this new Apple thing. And I think perhaps people were doing the overhead thing for that. I honestly don't remember. But it wasn't something, I didn't have great examples to copy from at that time. And certainly not great examples of how to kind of present a tutorial. And like I say, it took 3 minutes just of waffle to get started. A lot of ums and long pauses and silences, and just no rhythm to the way that I'm explaining things at all, really. It was like someone was just there watching me, and I would be talking to them, but I wouldn't care about the video format. It was just taking its time, which I think people actually kind of responded to quite well, actually. When I look back at it, it had that kind of music soundtrack, which is too loud. And
Whoa.
it was quite loud. Go on.
No, the brushes.
Yeah.
What?
Yes. Pretty
That has
different, isn't
changed
it?
a
Yeah.
lot.
There's so
Were
much
they the
that
only
just
6
wasn't there,
categories?
I think the categories there, I struggle to remember
Or would it
myself.
scroll?
I think there was just the categories at the top, isn't there? There's like, is that the airbrush at the top? Right.
Yeah.
And then the ones below it. And there's like,
Wow.
yeah, there's 5 different categories of brush, I think, at the time. There wasn't many. Yeah, so things were pretty primitive back then, really. But, it kick-started the whole process. A lot of ums and pauses and inadvertent, unintentional mouth noises, which I just can't even watch the damn thing anymore. I'm still very conscious of it. It's traumatized me, because a couple of people commented on it at the time, really sort of like, your content's really interesting, but my God, those horrible mouth noises. So, it's really stuck in my mind. And even now, I'm very conscious of, like, do I have a drink before I start talking? Am I going to loads of saliva noises when I'm talking? I hate it. I absolutely hate it. But yeah, it's just full of that, and I can't listen to it back. We talk about not liking the sound of our own voice. This is an example of me absolutely hating it, because not only is it my own voice, but it's just really dreadful in every sense. Really, I discourage people from watching this. Please don't watch it. Other than a morbid kind of curiosity to see how bad it
I'll
is
leave a link to it in the
presented,
description down below.
Yeah, thanks for that. But then it's got like one of the most amount of views for an actual tutorial that I've done. So it's crazy. I guess it's just been on there such a long time now. So
what is this hue slider? The hue saturation brightness slider. Wow. This is really interesting for a couple of different reasons. We've got your format and the actual app. The app is really interesting because for a start, they stuck to the principles, the main navigation at the top, completely. And I think that takes a lot of one, like, skill in terms of app design to say, we've nailed this, but also let's try and stick to it and not just add things for the sake of adding things. I find all of these things really interesting, just because it's, again, my day job, if anyone didn't know, like, to prototype and design apps. So to see
it's
this,
like looking back at the
really
original iPhone, just the history of the technology and the advancement, of how they've worked on it. It is fascinating. I didn't actually sit through and watch the whole thing of my own thing. I just got the first 5 minutes, like, that's enough, and then But it is fascinating to look back at how the app has evolved over time. Definitely.
It's also interesting to see your process that's changed over time, because one thing you pointed out previously is you didn't provide a palette at this point.
No.
It was grabbing a color, wasn't it?
I didn't provide palettes for quite a while, honestly. I think that was something when it started to be other people in the space, and maybe Art with Flo was doing, sharing her color palettes, and I started to realize that I couldn't just get away with describing the general color that I'm using. It needed to be specific. And maybe the content that I've created because of that has shifted and changed too. There's tutorials where I do like subtle shifts of green now that there's no way I could have explained the difference in color sufficiently to allow anyone to follow it. So that it's probably allowed me to be really subtle with the changes of hue these days. So I do share the palettes now. Obviously, I've been doing that for a long time. But that wasn't a consideration back at that point. I don't even think I would have known how to do it. Patreon is something that evolved with the process, and in terms of a place where you could send people to so they could download a color palette, just wasn't a consideration at that point in time. I wasn't even really thinking that much about people following it. It was more a kind of almost like a demonstration, really. This is what you can do, and this is how I would do it. And I guess in some senses, I just thought people might be interested and want to watch. I didn't think too much about the following of it. But then quickly I started to realize that actually was going to be the game, and that is going to be a crucial part of it. So it shifted it completely.
One thing, again, for me, it was great because everybody had set the standards. Everybody had set kind of how to go about all this, and it was a matter of, well, if you can create something that people want to watch, just you can get involved. But in here, like, to see the differences in the process that's happened, just more from a content creator kind of view, nothing necessarily from a user, but as you're very almost conversational rather than instructional, if that makes sense. There's moments where I noticed where you said, down here will be land, so you don't need to worry about that. In fact, actually, let's add the land here at the bottom. So I can imagine now you would probably say cut or whatever, and then let's just say next, let's add the land. And because that's what I do. Sometimes I hear myself and I go, no, just get to the point. You've gone way too long on that. And
there wasn't a lot of editing of it, actually. Intense speeding up the sections that is just going super fast and not really followable. But in terms of the conversational parts and the bits that aren't sped up, there's not a lot of editing going on, really. All those pauses and gaps and horrible mouth noises and mistakes and changes of direction, they're all just kind of left in, really. It was there wasn't a lot of there wasn't a lot of editing, really, frankly. And I wasn't even using a good editing thing at the time. I think I was using I can't remember, mine's gone blank now. What's the free Apple editing thing that's really basic?
iMovie?
Yeah, just the basic iMovie, which does naff all. It's not great, is it? In terms of the basic one, it allows you to splice things, to cut things out, and some subtle things, but not a lot. But it, even then, it's amazing what you can achieve with very little, isn't it? I suppose.
Oh, absolutely. And one thing I noticed is you're using an accessory, which you don't really tend to do these days in terms of like
you don't
a grip.
need to. I don't. Some people do. I used that was the Apple Pencil one. It was very, very soon after it was launched, and the first iPad Pro 12.9 inch. It's actually sat in a case there. which actually stopped it sliding around the desk. That was the main purpose in the case, really. So yeah, and the Apple Pencil is quite slippery. The first Apple Pencil, um, and so I actually found it was it was a Bic biro. It was a certain style that had like a rubber thing on it, and I thought, well, perfect. So I just prized it off and managed to fit it on the end of the Apple Pencil, and it would work perfectly. So yeah, I mean, I think quite a lot of people copied that, in terms of like the actual specific biro where you can prize off the rubber bit. I sort of
That's
shared that
cool.
quite a lot. Quite a lot of people ended up copying that, and then it became something that manufacturers produced, didn't they? I think you can still get them for the Apple Pencil too, as well, but I just doesn't feel like it needs it for me. Do you use anything like that?
I'm looking. My iPad has the upper grip on it, so it is that one there.
Yes.
And the good thing about this one is it has the cutout, so it
Right.
can just rest on the iPad and
Yeah.
charge. So I like that because it's not something I have to think about and go and get later on. It's already there, and I've just got used to it being there. If I'm
Yeah.
honest, I've just got used to it, and the flat edge that it has,
So you can
because
charge
it
it
obviously then
still.
allows the double tap charge, but also it gives your index finger a much larger space to
Sure.
just rest. So yeah, I do use it. I've used quite a few. I've got a whole drawer full of grips and sleeves and all that kind of stuff, but I don't really use them.
Yeah.
Any other ones, I only use that one because it's seamless. If I had to take it on and off every time I finish a recording or to charge, I would never use it. So I think they nailed it on that one. But that one there, you would obviously have to take off, wouldn't you, every single time? But then that pencil charged very differently, didn't it?
It wouldn't attach to anything. You'd have to plug it into the iPad at the end, wouldn't you, with the lightning
Of course, yeah.
plug?
Give it
So
a little aerial.
there was no magnets involved, so it never
Yeah.
interfered. It was never, it just stayed on it. It seems very strange looking back. The width of the borders of the iPad and everything, Although I noticed my camera angle is a bit of a tilt. I really tried my best now to get it square on, so it's directly above the iPad. I think I did pretty well in terms of reflections on that one. I think I must have fluked it because there are some that have very definite reflections, and you can see my face in it, like you were saying before on yours. I think just the lack of light around me has probably helped me on that front.
Yeah. There you go. There's a tilt. This is what I was saying when we were talking before.
I think it just slid on the table.
Cut.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Oh well.
If you ever get that kind of angle, you can actually like fix it in certain apps. For example, my camera angle typically does have a kind of top heavy point. So now I always have to fix it in the edit just because of where I position everything. But what do you think about the design there so far? So obviously we've got this sky scene and the clouds and the sun in the background. What do you think of it so far?
It's a bit.
Is there anything that stands out to
you? I don't really like it on many fronts, really. In terms of like if I was doing as a sky, I don't like it. It's not good enough. I don't like it when you can see it zoomed in. I can see all the layers of the airbrush overlapping. It doesn't look like the right kinds of texture, and also it's quite difficult, I think, for people to follow. There's a lot of painterliness about it. It's not broken down into easy to follow steps, in the way that I produce now. It's more aimed probably at a demonstration at somebody who is already capable of kind of doing these things, really. And I think that's probably where it sat. So people that were used to drawing and painting would look at this and be interested in the iPad already. And then it's evolved now so that it's aimed at entry level and medium, mid level and even sort of more advanced level in terms of the refined details. But there wasn't a lot of consideration in terms of how easy it was to follow. It was more of just a demonstration, really, and difficult because I would generally try to avoid zooming in too much, and depending on where you sat and the way you're angled, it's kind of a bit awkward, and it takes a while to get used to working with the iPad flat on the table so it's not pointed towards you, and just be sat in that uncomfortable position. I think initially I wasn't nervous, but it was alien. It was strange to be sat at a desk in an office chair. I would only ever use it on my lap, really slouched on the sofa, really. You know, I wouldn't sit at a desk and do work on an office chair, and I wouldn't sit upright, and I wouldn't be flat on a desk, and I wouldn't have a camera, and I wouldn't, you know, all these things were just weird initially. But it's really intuitive now. I don't even give it a second thought. It's strange how it's
Yeah,
become just so ingrained in the way that I work. Um, and I think I've managed to keep some of the spontaneity that I initially had in terms of just getting the camera going and going for it. And,
yeah,
you know, I think that I don't make as many mistakes or changes in direction that I used to. But I think I've managed to develop a kind of intuition for things like brush sizes and opacity and colours and all the rest of it that I didn't have back then. So these things come with time, I guess, don't they?
yeah, definitely, and just confidence, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
Like, to be fair, the design looks absolutely great. Like the
Yeah.
clouds look awesome. So much sort of depth to them, and shape and volume as well. Like the lighting is amazing. I could still see this. It still very much is your style as well. So, you know,
I like the contrast
and
and
you,
pops and
I hope,
bright colour.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I thought you might take that in a negative way of being like, well, I
yeah.
hope I've moved on, but no, it still does have a very sort of your style to it and sort of aesthetic. Because I've seen so many of your kind of cloud designs where you do the lovely low hanging sun, and it just
Yeah.
sort of highlights and accents the clouds on the underside of them. So
There was no
fits in
add
like
blend mode
perfectly.
used on this one, whereas now I'd be
Oh,
all over the add blend mode, you know?
I wouldn't know what to do with myself back then.
No.
So what is it, an overlay, or is it literally just going in with the
I
right
just going in with the
luminosity,
right
I guess, of
colours,
the
you
brush?
know? Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just like you would do with an acrylic kind of, you know, paint, really. There's not a lot of tools used within the app. It's very a primitive approach, really, at that point. It's very new to the app. I didn't know a great deal about it. No, it's not quite true, actually. Um, Not quite true. I was doing some work on the iPad before the iPad Pro. I think I had, would it have been called an iPad Air at that point? It was smaller. It was 9.7 inches, and I had a Wacom rubber tipped. Um, was it pressure sensitive because it had batteries? It's very hard to remember. It's mind blowing
Yeah.
that you forget these little, you know, steps along the way towards where you are now. But so yeah, I was using it, but I don't remember using the layers or any tricks and tools that much in depth. It was mainly just treating it like it was paper, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a skill set in its own, just to make sure you can nail the colours and apply them in the correct way and get the tones as bright as they should be. One thing I notice every time you zoom out, the camera struggles, doesn't it, with the lighting. So the clouds, the blue at the top gets brighter the further you zoom out.
Yeah. Yeah, there
This
wasn't any.
this
Yeah, well, there probably was the option to kind of to set it, you know, and standardize it, but I didn't understand any such thing at the time, so
I'm
I
starting
understand
to
it now, kind of.
understand your almost PTSD of this topic of people saying that your colors look different than they do on camera, and
Yeah,
obviously this one, because if you skip towards the end of this when you show
looks
the
nothing
final
like it,
design
does it?
compared to the video, the colors are very different. Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
the brightness of the iPad
yeah,
against the actual video. Yeah, it's so interesting to see the difference. If we let's jump to
yeah.
around about here. I think it pops up any second. Or did I miss it? Maybe I've missed it. It popped up
Maybe it was
when
at
I
the
first
beginning,
watched
was
it.
it? Was it at the very start, or was there a black and white version at the start?
I don't really know. I could have
I think,
sworn it was right at the very end.
yeah, I normally
You
do.
Yeah, I thought you faded it over the top. Or maybe I've completely missed it
Maybe it was at
somewhere.
the very start at the intro, but maybe that was the black and white version. I can't remember. Yeah, I didn't make it all the way to the end to check, so.
Did you? So in research for today's video, did you
I didn't
watch it
sit
back
through the
at
whole
all?
thing. Yeah, oh yeah, I watched it a little bit. I watched both of ours. Yeah, it's just black and white there. But
Yeah,
yeah, I'm trying to think where you'll have seen maybe just the. Yeah, strange.
I definitely saw it in here somewhere.
Maybe a preview at the beginning. I can't remember.
It's
People go
good to
check
look
it out
back
if you
though.
want to look, I suppose. But
Yeah, it's great to look back on the first ones because for me as well, I remember when I first got into the Procreate space, in just as a user, watching some of your early videos before I'd even started. So like a few things, I think even at the time you were kind of doing a similar concept of like, oh, well, let's grab this kind of orangey tone up here, and letting people kind of drag the disc to the same spot. So yeah, there was a few things in there that I kind of remember as well, like as a consumer of content at the very beginning.
I mean, things change, don't they? One thing I do like about looking back is seeing that the changes that clearly have taken place. To be looking back and finding it so easy to criticize it is obviously a sign that we've improved, isn't it? It's all for the better, really, you know. I mean, I can look back at something from a year ago, you know, not even that long ago, and think, well, you know, the microphone was shocking, and the, you know, all sorts of little aspects. So we continue to evolve, not just the artwork, but the production, the way that we speak, the way that we explain things. It's all heading in a hopefully the right direction of improving, isn't it?
I think also you stop thinking about kind of the perception of what you look like or sound like, to a degree of like to friends and family or whatever. Like you just get on with it. I mean, when you get to a certain point and you know people start to realize, oh, you're doing really well. That their opinion isn't joking anymore. It's not like, oh, look at you making videos on, you know, your dining table or whatever it may be. It's actually just, and that's probably just my mates, to be honest. But you know, they are far more aware that you've been successful and you're flying. And then look at where we are now. I mean, you know, we're doing the show together now every week. So, you know, you weren't on camera, I don't think, was it? How long have we been doing this now? 4 months?
I still might retreat back into the shadows at some point. I come with it wearing, you know, a bike, like a Stig. Do you remember Stig from Top Gear? Yeah, I might just come with a helmet, a mask of some sort in the future. I wonder if he was ever see my face on camera. It's a different thing, like listening to your voice, isn't it? You get used to it, and you know, I'm getting used to my face being on camera. If I look back to the first episode of this show, which was only a couple of months ago, and it's already changed since then. So things do change quickly, don't they?
Yeah, and I think you slowly start to widen your spectrum a little bit. You realize, oh, now I'm on video, and you kind of watch yourself back and go, oh, I hate that. Oh, what I do, or blah, blah, blah. And then 15, 16 episodes in now, you start to go, I don't really care anymore. Like, you know, I mean, you just carry on, and I don't really notice any of the other things that maybe we spot in the very first few episodes. Now it's just far more comfortable, and you carry on. And that's just something that comes with YouTube in general, doesn't it? Over time, we did
have a conversation when we first started. Are we going to use expletives? Are we going to allow ourselves to swear on this show, didn't we? And we came to the decision that maybe it wouldn't be appropriate. So we are relaxed at certain times, but we're not necessarily fully, you know, as candid as we would be, perhaps. And maybe people can leave in the comments, you know, would they want us to be absolutely free with our language, or do they like the kind of really respectful tone that we keep? Because we do have a thing that I'm aware of is on the tutorials we cater to all age categories, where it might be young kids and it might be elderly. You know, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. You know, because people are still. It amazes me that people in the late 80s are taking up an iPad and creating digital artwork. Is just mind blowing. Really, it's so admirable. I hope that I'm like that anything close to that kind of age. But it means that I'm conscious that I try to keep it respectable and respectful. So we don't F and Jeff here, don't we? We don't, you know, we don't use bad language.
People should hear the outtakes of, not outtakes, but the after recording of us too, because there's a different conversation. If you want to hear the sketch wave, I don't know, unraveled, you know, uncut uncensored. Or whatever, uncensored, and the conversations we have that are not really art related, but just general conversations, please actually let us know in the comments, because if people want to hear that kind of content, maybe we can start to you know, shape the content a different way. But the conversations we have off air as well are completely different, and talking about all sorts of stuff, the difference in music these days and stuff like that. But I think people would maybe find that quite interesting. We'll see how that goes. But this was a good little fun little look back at some of our previous content. You're actually away now for a week, aren't you, on holiday?
Yes, going to Wales, caravanning. So a nice little trip away. The weather's supposed to be good, so I might come back with a bit of a tan with a bit of luck.
Nice.
But we'll see. How about your week ahead? Is it going to be a busy one? Or?
Well, that wall needs painting,
more
same
painting.
as the other walls. So more
Good luck with that.
painting. I feel like I'm doing so many small jobs, but I understand why people make YouTube channels now for moving home and doing small things in the home. You know, just mini projects here and there, because it's quite rewarding to do like a small task that you can see what you want to do and just make it a little bit better here. And bit by bit, you build it all up. But I definitely see why people make YouTube channels on it, because they want to share that. But I won't be doing that. Don't anybody worry. I simply don't have the time. So yeah. James, thank you as always. Enjoy your holiday as well next week. I hope the weather's great. Guys, thank you so much for watching. We are still trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by Halloween. So please subscribe to the channel. Yeah, we are inching closer every single day. If you could subscribe to the channel, that would be amazing. Links to all our socials are in the description down below.